And Ha'oli Lā Hoʻihoʻi Ea. I'm Trevor Atkins, and I'll be hosting our panel of parents. It's July 20th, and we welcome all our live viewers out there, as well as those of you that'll be watching a recorded version of our conversation today about parents as educators here in the Hawaiian Kingdom. First, I'd like to give some context to the event today. As many of you know, and perhaps some of you don't, Lā Hoʻihoʻi Ea was arguably our favorite holiday in the Hawaiian Kingdom from when sovereignty was returned by the British Crown in 1843 on July 31st. And we celebrated that holiday for 50 years until it was deliberately and purposefully erased from our memory when American occupation began in 1893. Then there was a long time before 1985 when Dr. Kekuni Blaisdell and his colleagues revived our holiday and we began celebrating it again. And this year we celebrate 35 years strong of Lā Hoʻihoʻi Ea once again. It's grown into a month-long celebration of enduring sovereignty, and there's events going on across all islands and all genres. And I hope you've been a part of some of the other things that have been happening. If not, you can check them out on Lā Hoʻihoʻi Ea's Facebook page or Instagram. This is our 5th annual Hoike Ea conference on Hawaiian national education. In previous years, we had the privilege of meeting face-to-face on different places on Oahu. And in our first year, we drafted a 10-point plan to affirm what Hawaiian education looks like. And then in the following year, we ratified it with over 100 participants. And since then, we've been getting together and trying to in this conference to bring Ea education to life in our communities. So this year we had to go online for better or for worse. The good part is that we're able to involve folks that aren't on Oahu and even have folks speak that aren't on Oahu. So today is part 3 of a 4-part series. Last Monday, we featured teachers who are bringing Mauna Kea into their classrooms. We featured students who are bringing Black Lives Matter into our institutions. This week, we feature families who are empowering their children's learning in the midst of the coronavirus lockdown. And so I'm excited to let these 4 mana wahine introduce themselves. They're gonna tell you who they are, where they come from, what they call their day job, and the names of all the keiki that they take care of. So let's go ahead and hear from our panelists. Aloha.
Aloha kako. My name is Michele Wilhelm, and I'm currently sitting in the beautiful space of Kapali in Maunawili, Kailua. I'm originally from Tule Lake, California, which is way up in the mountains in the very tip top of California. But for the last 27 years, I've lived in Kailua, and the last 13, I call my home Kapali in Maunawili. My husband and I started the organization Hoʻokuaʻāina in 2011. We've opened up 7 acres and restored an overgrown jungle into a vibrant, abundant loʻi kalo, and we're currently running programs for at-risk youth, families, community, and schools. So that's what I call my day job. We co-direct the organization. I'm obviously a mom and managing a farm as well. My keiki, I have 4 keiki. A 12-year-old's going to be in 7th grade, a 17-year-old who is going to be a senior, a junior in college at Stanford University, and a graduate from a recent graduate from UH-Hilo Makana. She graduated in May. So because of COVID, they're all at home. And yeah, our educational journey has been mostly charter schools, mostly cultural or Hawaiian immersion charter schools starting in kindergarten. But we did take a 3-year period of homeschooling about 6 years ago before our organization started. And then my kids decided they wanted to integrate back into school to play sports. So we basically ran the full gamut of homeschool, private school, public school, with a focus mostly on charter schools. In the last 5 years, 4 going on the 5th year we've been at Hālau Kū Māna. Mahalo.
Mahalo,
Aloha
Michele.
mai na lehu lehu. Kala mai, Trevor.
Aloha.
Aloha mai na lehu lehu o wau Mehana Makaʻinaʻi no ka mokupuni o Oahu mai au no kailua ka ele pulu mai au a keiki manawa ke noha nei wau I ka neʻohe ko ʻelau poko. My name is Mehana Makaʻinaʻi. Mahalo for having me today. I am a mother of 4 also, like a number of the panelists. My oldest, A'awela Iole'a, is 12, and my next, Iliwai Po'iu, is 10. My next daughter is Kaya Ko'olau, she is 8, and my youngest, O'eloi Kaleva, he is almost 4 years old. For us, my husband is a firefighter, Jesse, and he also does home inspections, so he's out and about quite a bit. I'm a full-time instructor at UH-Mānoa, and I'm also probably my primary caregiver for all of the keiki in my family. They, like Michele, we are strongly connected to the charter schools, and our foundation for education has always been the Kula Kaiapuni, which are the Hawaiian immersion schools. So all of my children began in immersion. Some of them are still there, and my youngest will be beginning immersion next year. It was supposed to be this year, but for many of us, plans changed due to the pandemic. So he's going to spend 1 more year at home with mom and his tutus, learning at home before he starts his immersion journey. So thank you for having me today. I look forward to sharing with all of you. I try to incorporate, I teach Hawaiian Studies at UH, so we incorporate a lot of what I'm teaching to the college students with our keiki at home. We also like to do a lot of land-based learning, and we have a very strong Lā Hoʻihoʻi. I'm a part of a group of wahine. We all help take care of one another's children. And with our husbands, we try to give our keiki exposure to a number of different skills that we believe are really important for living here in Hawaii, taking care of our islands, and understanding our kuleana as kanaka and as residents of this place.
Mahalo, Mehana.
Aloha kako. My name is Piper Lovemore. Thank you for tuning in today, and thank you for asking me to be a part of this. I am a mother to 7 keiki. My eldest is Che, he's 14. He'll be a freshman in high school this year. Then I have Plum, she will be 12 soon, and she's going into 7th grade. My Rocket is 10, she'll be a 5th grader. Then I have Moxie, she is soon to be 8. She'll be rising into the 3rd grade. My son Axiom is going to be a 1st grader, and he is going to be 6. And then I have Magic, who would be a preschooler this year, and we considered enrolling her in an immersion program, but because of what's happening in the world right now, we've decided to continue with our home-based learning program for her as well. She's 3 years old, and then our new baby, our 7th child, his name is also 7, and he's 7 months old. I believe I was going to talk a little bit more about our educational background in a moment, but just for a quick check-in, my personal background is having grown up in Germany. So I did all of my elementary education and completed high school in Germany and was an immersion student myself. I learned to speak German fluently by being raised there, though no one else in my family speaks the language. I then moved to Atlanta and was honored to attend the prestigious Spelman College, which is another immersion experience in and of itself. And after college, my partner and I moved to Hawaii, where we have been thankfully for 12 years come April. So all of our children have experienced their educational experiences here. Thank you.
Mahalo, Piper.
Aloha mai kako. Wau no Leilani. No ma wakini kona wau I Hanawai aka I Lahaina wau in Hawaii. My name is Leilani. A diaspora Hawaiian who grew up in Washington State, but my family is from Pololo. But I live in Lahaina with my husband, Kapali, and our 3 keiki. Kaiao is my oldest, she's 9. Meliana Aipohaku is my middle, and they were both born here in Lahaina at our home, returning ancestral birth back to my husband's birth sands. And then my youngest, Kamalu Mamalahoa, he was born at my midwife's house up in Haiku. So I, let's see. Well, my background is in Hawaiian Studies and Hawaiian language, and I taught at Hālau Kū Māna for a couple years. And then my husband and I knew just kind of when we decided to birth at home and incorporate traditional Hawaiian birth practices into our whole birth journey, we just knew that it wasn't going to end after the birth, that we wanted to continue that journey of rearing our kids sovereignly. So me and my husband my husband Kapali Keahi is a professional musician here in Lahaina, and I'm a full-time student midwife, which keeps both of us pretty busy, but gives us enough flexibility in our schedule to really both focus on the rearing of our children, as well as incorporating our multi-generational family that we live with into their rearing. So we just try and make everything teachable moments, and really focusing on like the lifelong skills that they'll need as being Hawaiian nationals and Kanaka here in Lahaina. So excited to be here with all you, and looking forward to talking on this really important subject.
Mahalo, Leilani. So, and I'm a teacher as well, and I'm also a young parent. I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and so I think like many of our viewers, I'm questioning what to do come this fall. We had a plan, and that plan is certainly being called into question, maybe not necessarily disrupted, but being called into question by this lockdown and public schools planning to reopen and private schools doing all sorts of different things. And so I think the question that a lot of us less experienced parents have is, for those of you that have kind of been through a lot of different things, and we really appreciate the diversity of our panel here, with so many different ages of keiki and so many different educational experiences. What was your educational plan before the lockdown, and how is the pandemic changed or not changed your folks' plans for this fall?
Okay, well, thank you once again for being invited to speak on the panel today. I was most excited just to be listening in, because as of Wednesday, I still didn't know what I was going to do with my keiki. So I'm really looking forward to hearing some other ideas and listening to the other parents and how they're adjusting to everything. It seems like every day or every week things are changing, and people are just trying to adapt to our current situation. So I know just from in our circle, we've experienced a lot of anxiety from parents and friends, and even from the kids, and just trying to have meaningful conversations around like what are our options, and there are a lot of options. That's the great thing. Pre-pandemic, we were or pre-lockdown, we were settled at Hālau Kū Māna, but we were actually looking into some other alternatives for our 7th grader. Homeschooling was not an option for us, because both Dean and I have very full-time positions, and I just knew or felt like I didn't have the time needed and necessary to give to my keiki, who is also, he's a male, a 12-year-old male. And sometimes mom and son do not do well sitting next to each other. So he needs to be active and engaged and around other keiki. So that was a concern of mine. We were looking into a bunch of different options. Then the lockdown happened, and I know everybody had to scramble. So we're kind of in a different position now. It didn't feel so comfortable to all of a sudden not have a place to send your kids and then to try to make up a plan just shooting from our hips. So basically from March to June, and because I've homeschooled before, I just said, we're not homeschooling, we're just mitigating the situation. So let's just make the best of it. Let's not have any false expectations. Let's try to support the kumu however we can and get to June and then start thinking about what the fall might look like. But I know there's just been so many talks going back and forth. Are the schools going to open? Are they not going to open? So immediately we started to think about, we better look into what our options might be. So as I said, up until last Wednesday or this past Wednesday, I had not made a choice because it seemed like a lot of the doors were closing. There's waiting lists. We've looked at online schools. We've looked at the possibility of going back to Hālau Kū Māna, but just thinking about the atmosphere of the masks and the social distancing and the problems that might present, and looking at our own child, I don't think that would be an ideal learning environment for him. So, and I also don't think that homeschooling is the best option for him, but we've made the decision that that's what we're going to do. And we've chosen a curriculum that it's a co-op curriculum. So one day a week, we're gonna meet in person. And then we also have a lot of online resources for math and science. So that's gonna be our base. My senior, I'm not worried about. She's enrolled in online classes at KCC, and she's gonna continue to attend Hālau Kū Māna. I think the older keiki can navigate these situations at school a little bit better than the younger ones. So I'm at peace about her education this year. For Kamuala, who's going to be a 7th grader, I'm trying to go back to the 3 years that I did homeschool. And that's what I guess my contribution to the conversation can be, is that I know what it's like to be in this position of having a little bit of anxiety about, are we doing the best for our kids? Are we going to give them what they need to be prepared and to set the foundation for whatever it is moving forward? And I guess I would just say, from my 3 years of experience, even though in my mindset right now is like, I have no time to homeschool, but I have to homeschool. So what am I going to do with my situation and my own resources to make this happen and make it a positive learning environment for my son? The great news is that we live in an incredible place surrounded by incredible resources for learning. So I'm going to try my best to get him engaged in those things. For one example, we live with a loʻi right in our backyard. So I'm going to use that as our science lab. I'm gonna try to engage him as much as possible and try to make the learning fun and relevant to his style of learning. So one example is during the pandemic, he wasn't showing too much excitement about school or learning or reading or doing math or anything. I'm like, what can I do that would engage him and make it a learning opportunity, like a incognito learning opportunity? So we decided to learn how to make chocolate. We grow cacao on our aina, but we've never done anything with the pods. So from A to Z, we started the whole process, and I just made it a science project. We harvested, we fermented, we roasted, and in the meantime, we learned all kinds of things about microbiology and chemistry and just processing, and some math along the way, and some video making. So there were multi-subjects that we were covering. We were reading about the history of chocolate through the Mayan and Aztecan civilizations. And before you knew it, in 3 months, he had a wealth of knowledge and completed a science project and didn't even know it, and had an after product that was ono and fun that he enjoyed. So I'm going to try to keep my focus on things like that and engaging him in ways that are not just sitting down at a table in front of a screen, and being creative with our outdoor environment, using the ocean for PE and exercise, engaging with other community organizations, fish ponds, loʻi, streams, whatever, where he can learn about mo'olelo, history, science, math, whatever the case may be. So that's my plan. And that's what I'm hoping to make the best out of this situation. The best thing I can say to all of those who are in some predicaments or are worried or have a lot of anxiety about all of a sudden becoming teachers, that to give yourself a ton of grace upon grace upon grace, because you're not going to ruin your kids. This is actually a blessing in disguise. We're going to have opportunities to sit with our keiki and learn so much about them and about their learning styles, and then be able to adapt and adjust to who they are as individuals. And I know that that was the biggest blessing in the 3 years that we homeschooled, is I learned so much about my kids, and that the three of them, the three girls at that time, they all have different learning styles, and not every school fit. I couldn't put them all into the same school. It wasn't a good fit for each of them. So I'm trying to think of this as a blessing and turn it into an opportunity, and utilize my resources. Don't be afraid to reach out to help, to ask, to engage, find the groups and the co-ops that are meeting and doing face-to-face and having social interaction, which is really important. But a main thing, get outdoors, get in the mud, get yourself immersed in some good microbiology, and keep your microbiome healthy during this time. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Michele.
Mahalo. Pre-pandemic, I had 3 children in school. One was attending Kulakayapuni immersion school. 2 were at a private school in Kaneʻohe. And we were in pretty much every sport possible. I had a son playing baseball, 2 girls in soccer. Basketball season had just ended. We did a lot of crossover. I was working full-time at the university. My husband was working his 2 jobs. It was pretty busy, but we also still found time, of course, for family, some of our favorite activities, surfing, going to the beach, things like that, going to Hawaiʻi Island, because my family's from Hawaiʻi Island. We spend as much time as possible and money as can be allocated to those trips. And so that was kind of our life before the pandemic. And I was really happy with the education my children were receiving. My youngest in Kayapuni has been the foundation for all of my children. I always knew that, you know, as parents, we all have goals, and we all have values that we want to instill in our babies that they're going to be able to take with them through their entire life and use as a foundation for careers and being a part of society, getting involved in various movements. And for me and my husband, one of the really important things we wanted our children to always have and be rooted in them was Olelo Hawaii. And this is EAducation, Ea, that idea of life and sovereignty and breath. Our identity as people is very much contained in that Olelo Hawaii, because through the language we get that glimpse into what our kupuna knew, what they wanted us to be able to do and accomplish. We learn about kuleana. So immersion has always been our foundation. And then because, you know, every environment you gotta continue expanding and learning and trying new things, we move into other environments after. So my older 2 were already in private school at this time in 6th and 4th grade. And so I was really happy, and the private school is going really well too, challenging academically. All schools, I think you have to supplement no matter what you're doing, kind of what Michele was saying. For my babies who left immersion, I had a Hawaiian language tutor that would actually tutor them. For my baby who was in immersion, she would go to English language tutor. So, you know, you're always doing different things to try to give them a really well-rounded experience. And then the pandemic happened and everybody came home, and I came home too. My class went online, and we have pretty limited computer. None of my kids have cell phones. TV is limited. So that was a big change for everybody to get onto iPads and laptops and those kinds of things. And we were so lucky because my mom had asked me if she could buy my son a laptop for Christmas. And I was like, you know what, he's getting older. Okay, we'll monitor it. And I was like, thank God you bought it for him, Mom, because I don't know what we would have done with all these kids online. And so my older two, their school was pretty much, it was like being in school. You checked in at all the different times. They had strict curriculum. Both of my children said it was actually harder than being in the classroom because there was even more expectations and none of the comedic relief that you get being in a classroom with a bunch of kids and that. And they were on their own because I'm trying to do my work, watch the baby, and then I was helping my daughter who was in immersion. And I noticed that with my older two, I spent a lot of time with them, making lessons for them, doing things with them. And as you add on to the babies, maybe it's just me, but it kind of lessened with each keiki because you're, you know, doing all these different things at once. And I got to sit down with my third born and we got to do her lessons together. And we would sit there every day, we'd carve out time in our schedule, we'd do the lessons together. And it was really wonderful. And I got to see areas where she was very on it and it was natural, and areas where I thought, oh, these are things I can help her with and we can work with. And so that was a great experience. So from learning from that, moving forward into this next upcoming year and what we're gonna do, originally the plan was 4 kids, 4 schools, and we've thrown that out the window. Like I said, my youngest, we're keeping him home. I didn't feel the need to send him to preschool this year, especially if there is a chance that everyone's going to end up back at home. I didn't want him in front of a screen. So I've worked it out with my parents and my in-laws, where we've created our own system of watching the kids and introducing curriculum. My mom, for example, is a hula practitioner, so she can do hula and chant with the kids. My dad is a lawyer. He's very involved in Mauna Kea and various movements and things like Lā Hoʻihoʻi Ea. So he has different things he can offer. My mother-in-law is a business owner. And so I just thought we have so much wonderful education that we already have been offering to our kids and can continue to do. So that's the plan for the youngest. My daughter, Hoike Ea, who's in immersion again this year, our immersion school has just informed us that they're going to move to 2 days a week, and then the other 3-year child will be at home. And so we're kind of figuring that out. I was on the fence like you, Michelle. Should I just keep her home? Should I homeschool? And after really thinking hard about this, I do want her to still have her kaiaulu, her community. I still want her to have those chances to be completely immersed in Olelo. So we are very likely going to continue sending her on her 2 days. And then on the other days, I am trying to work it out with her kumu to be able to do my own curriculum at home. So a little bit of a blended model between her being at school and us doing our own curriculum that we want to offer her. I'm fortunate because my class that I teach at the university has gone online as well. So I do have that flexibility. I know some families don't. You have to go back full time and you're like, my kid might be home part-time. So I am very fortunate that I will be able to tend to my school duties and still be able to create that curriculum for my babies. Not alone though, with the help of my family and my really close friends that we all kind of look out for each other. If you don't have your own little lahui, get yourself a little lahui, because I think in raising children, it's so helpful to have people who have the same kind of values, but also different skills. So we can all kind of share and work together. And that's something that we're trying to figure out. And that's a goal for us in this moving into the upcoming semester. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Mehana.
Okay, our plans going forward are not changing drastically from where we've been. We are an unschooling family. We came to the unschooling path, I would say 12 to 14 years ago. Our oldest is 14, really out of a foundational desire to decolonize the education our children will receive, and perhaps a lack of financial resources to invest in doing that far outside of our home. But we, similar to what Mehana and Michele have described, felt like we had a rich resources in our home to be able to impart to our children. And we began our journey, much like Michele described with the cacao, just following our interests to the nth degree, really trying to support our children into to following their curiosity and being driven there. One of the really wonderful things that came out of that early on was disabusing ourselves of the notion that we had to have the answer for all the questions, and instead learning to seek them together as a family. And that really helped us to crystallize, I think, what is most important to our educational journey at home. And that is not necessarily coaching the children to memorize all of the details, but just absolutely helping them to understand that they can find the information that they like. And now in the digital age, that's become even more accessible. So we've also wanted to go back and ground their ability to do that even outside of digital means, reaching into their community, reaching into their ancestry, to just further their own drive for information. So we've been unschooling for a long time. We recently chosen to infuse world schooling as part of our unschooling journey. We've been taking longer trips together. We really feel like it's important to learn from the Aina and from the community around you, and we wanted to expand their worldview. So interestingly enough, when this particular lockdown began, we were actually all abroad in the Netherlands, and were quarantined there for a month, longer than we had planned to staying in our travels, and have been home since then. So that was a great way to sort of talk about current events and help the children contextualize what will be how it will impact their education this fall. Though we root most of our learning in our home, we definitely enjoy participating in lots of community activities. They love the Parks and Rec programs. They're all little fish, so they've done all of the Parks and Rec's opportunities for anything aquatic, and also enjoy lots of the other sports, as well as programs at the Art Museum. There are things that really help to flesh out their influences beyond what we're able to offer in the home. So they will definitely be disappointed to be missing out on some of those experiences. But because they understand that the whole world is experiencing lockdown right now, having been there abroad, they have more patience, I think, with what's happening. I know a lot of children are feeling anxious by having some of their regular things disturbed. And so I'm grateful that the children at least have that context. Another thing that has really helped us through this moment is that we are familiar with quarantining. I am an empirical midwife, and as a community birth worker, my children understand the rhythms of life and birth in particular. My partner is an audio engineer and is the production manager at the Blue Note. So he works evenings, and we've been able to sort of offset our schedule, maintaining supervision and support for all 7 keiki while we also both work full time. We also have a multi-generational household. My mother lives with us, so she's able to spot us in those moments. And so as a birth worker, every time we have a baby, which is roughly every 2 years or so, we go on a month-long family quarantine, and the children are familiar with the idea of not leaving the house. They are also expected to quarantine in that time. We really want to give our infant a wonderful opportunity to just stew in all of our family juices and get all of the, get a flourishing microbiome together before we expand their world outside of our doors. So we have really developed a family practice over the years of entertaining ourselves and our many children during that time. So it's actually been really wonderful now that we've been quarantining for several months, watching the older children take up that task of entertaining the younger ones and watching them recycle some of the ideas that we did with them when we were quarantining with previous births of siblings, and seeing them take the initiative. Just the other day, it was really hot where we live in Makakilo. The children took a tarp that we had been using under our birth pools and had stored in our garage. They took it out and attached it to a bunch of chairs so that it was up on all of the edges, and then filled it with water because they felt like it was hot and they wanted to have a pool in the backyard. And so to me, that was great. That was the lesson right there. They had to really work out how they were going to support it and how they could keep the sides of the tarp elevated once there was water, which added extra weight and started to tip some of the chairs over. So I, like Michele mentioned earlier, really have learned to see learning happening everywhere all the time. That's one of the foundational elements of unschooling. And I'm actually kind of grateful for the challenge that this period has created for us all to become more creative, and also to be appreciative for the signs that we're seeing that our children are in fact okay, that they are learning all the time, that they are also nurturing their younger siblings. To us, that is one of the core elements of things that we want them to understand from their educational experience. The softer skills, not just the concrete skills of being able to read and write and arithmetic, but also emotional intelligence and the acumen of being able to function in their environment. And so I'm glad that we're able to see some of those things being reflected in this period. So going forward, our plan is essentially more of same. We will continue to unschool, but we do have a little bit of structure within unschooling. It's such a vast umbrella sort of term, and every family, I think, makes their own sense of it, and also engages in flow as they do that. There are times when we do use more curriculum tools and times when we're sort of free form. So what it essentially is for us is having a conversation with our children, identifying projects that our keiki are interested in. My eldest right now is really interested in cosplaying, and so he's taken on the task of creating costumes from scratch for all of the characters in one of the series that he's interested in. And I have been absolutely blown away by what he's created, way beyond what I may have tried to teach him to do had he asked me. So that's some of the benefits coming down of having committed to this model. It's the reassurance that I needed, because sometimes, like someone else earlier said, we wonder, are we doing right by our keiki? So it's grateful to see, I'm grateful to be able to harvest some of those investments right in this period as well. With those who are younger and perhaps less focused on any specific or identifiable material goals, we talk about smaller things. Our younger ones, for instance, we're just still trying to master the alphabet and some foundational reading things. So we will sometimes supply goals for them if they don't come to the conversation with any specific ones in mind. And then we use our meetings to create a system of accountability. So some of the older siblings will volunteer to help younger siblings through tasks that they've identified. And I don't even mean to perpetuate a sort of age-based hierarchy, because it's just as common that the younger ones will volunteer to help the older ones as well. We will also express as parents goals that we have for our ohana, for our living space, and for ourselves personally. And then we commit to mutually supporting one another, and we discuss what that might look like. It gives us an opportunity to identify any needs, to articulate them so that we don't assume that everybody sort of knows what's up with the other, and creates a structure for us to check in with each other as well. So during this time, because there are less of these supplemental programs that we enjoy, like the Parks and Rec programs that drive structuring what we do at home, we have a little bit more free time. So we've relaxed some of the time-based structures that I did impose. So now if my son wants to stay up until midnight working on one of his projects, I'm fine with that. However, there are absolutely still natural consequences. We do still expect your chores to be done on time. We're not going to delay making breakfast because you didn't get to your dishes last night. And to me, that's a wonderful season to have alighted into as an unschooler, because we're able to now create the expectation that they manage their time, that they keep in mind what their chores are and how it affects the community within which they live. And then it gives them opportunities to check in with that, to attempt different things. Maybe I'll try to pull an all-nighter. Oh, didn't feel so great the next morning when I actually had to get up and live my responsibilities. Sometimes they negotiate with one another. Hey, I really want to stay up late tonight. If I get up late tomorrow, would you just knock that out for me? And if you do that, I'll help you with this, which is very much a life skill. And so at this point, I think that we are trying to create a loose framework that allows for everyone to contribute, to discuss how it's working for them, for us to modify in concert so that we can all move together towards the goals that we've identified as a family. And so I think that it's working pretty well, and I'm grateful for that. And I think that it is also, I'm realizing, allowing us to cultivate the structure that we would actually like to exist in antithesis, or an alternative at least, to that which we seek to decolonize with our education. So it's been kind of nice to watch this organic structure come to life within our family space, because when we first chose this path, it was really sort of a risk, but we just kind of figured, we can do better than whatever is sort of the general alternative, especially and in particular the way that it shows up for young Black children in the world today. And so we were motivated to do better And so far, I think we're doing okay. Thank you.
Mahalo, Piper. Much appreciated.
Yeah, I really just want to kākoʻo everything that literally the other three wahine said, because I think no matter how we all choose to articulate it, I think we're all coming from a very similar or foundational same space of just wanting to really do best we can by our kids and providing them with the expansiveness of tools to learn that they have around them. So for our family, well, first off, I just need a pretext that I'm what I'm gonna probably talk about is probably kind of radical and not exactly something that every family can do, and I completely recognize that, and just want to put the disclaimer that this is just what's worked for our family, and I understand that this isn't something all families can do, but we were able to do it. So like I said in our introduction, my kids were born at home, and we chose not to register them as Americans. They have Kingdom of Hawaii birth certificates. So knowing that, when we decided to go that route, we knew that we were really, really gonna take on the education and the rearing of our children as a family together, as a community. And that the quote unquote consequences of them not being Americans may leave them out of some resources, but at the same time, it's gonna open them up to a lot of other possibilities that may not be available to our Kanaka who live as Americans. So we knew, like Mehana was saying, like we knew we have a plethora of resources within our family that we, both me and Kapali ʻōlelo Hawaiʻi. So we didn't need to send our kids to other teachers to teach our kids ʻōlelo Hawaiʻi. Our children are raised in a multi-generational household. Just a couple weeks ago, my mother-in-law unfortunately passed away, but she took a huge part in the rearing of our children, and she raised 13 children. She was one of 13 children. She was the matriarch of our family, and really kind of considered, and I say this as humbly as I can, but like a queen of Lahaina. She was just, she comes from very, very deep roots here, very long-standing Hawaiian family. And we knew, I know, especially because I was raised by my grandmother too, that the window that you have with your kupuna is such a small time in our life, that, so we kind of see, instead of like setting this set curriculum, we kind of go with seasons. So the season of my kid's life that is now just passing was the season of their kupuna. It was like, let's spend as much time as we possibly can with your tutu. Like if it means watching Korean soap operas on TV and, you know, like just kicking it on the couch and you reading that way, that's fine. Like just spend as much time with this woman who is so revered in our family that, like, to us, there's nothing more foundational than that. So we really focused on making sure our kids developed that relationship with their tutu, and also developed their relationship with their siblings. I completely believe in multi-age education, which is something Hālau Kū Māna kind of helped me see, is that education doesn't need to be compartmentalized by age. And like Piper was saying, like to really get the older kids involved with the younger kids and the older kids involved with the tutu. Like my oldest daughter was raised like knowing that anytime her tutu asked her to do something, she's like, yes, tutu, okay, tutu, like never a complaint, never, ever a complaint, like did it with joy every single time. Like, even if it's getting her pack cigarettes or something, you know what I mean? Like it just, she was raised to know that you are your tutu's granddaughter and you're here to help take care of her too. Every time I would go away to school, because I'm in a midwifery school, so I would have to go to Maine for 2 weeks, a couple times a semester. She came and would live with the kids and basically take on the mom role while I was gone. I mean, she lived with us when I wasn't gone either, but again, I just really wanted, we just really decided that it was just very, very important for us to not like get stuck in this objectives and standards that like the Western system has kind of like conditioned us to think that kids at this age need to learn this at this age. We saw clearly that actually our kids need to learn this at that age, which is malama tutu, malama keiki, malama aina. So that's what we really focus on. Our family is really, really involved in protecting the land in here in Lahaina from developers and helping Hawaiian families reclaim kuleana land. So that is a huge part of our children's education. We're currently reclaiming family land right now, and even just the interaction between the developer and us, like they get all these questions in their head, like, why do they think we're not supposed to be here? Like we're like taking care of the land, like, you know, just like all these, you can just see their mind blowing up of whys. So I'll just kind of try and cut this off short because I could really talk about this forever, but really just developing their sense of identity, developing their sense of place, developing their sense of kuleana. That's really what we've been focusing on. My oldest is only 9, so we're now getting into the phase of more of research, writing, reading intensive kind of stuff, because she's now like interested in that kind of stuff. But we've really just focused on malama, the first phase of their life, which has been very beneficial for us. And that's what we're going to continue to do. The pandemic really hasn't changed anything for us, except that a lot of our family who was always going to school, they get to play with now all the time. So they are like totally digging that. Just, you know, Lahaina is kind of a tourist town, so it's really beautiful not having outsiders here all the time, and we can really, really enjoy the places that their kupuna fished for centuries, and the places that, you know, we can enjoy the river, and it's just a really beautiful time. So we're enjoying it, and we plan on continuing this lifelong journey of teaching and learning together.
Mahalo, Leilani, and mahalo to all our panelists. We're getting some really nice feedback on chat and the Q&A. I can see we've got 34 viewers on Facebook Live. And I want to invite all of our viewers, if you want to just say hi. We can't see who's watching or what your names are. So if you just want to say hello, you're welcome to. We also got a really good question from Makaiva Kanui over in Hilo / Pu'uhuluhulu. And she asked a question that I also wanted to ask you folks, because I think all 4 of our panelists today are so good at staying positive and being optimistic about the situation, whether it's this lockdown or whatever situation you folks have been in. You always seem to find a way to make something good out of it. Makaiva's question was, what are the are there any resources or models that you know of to kind of help you unschool or decolonize the way that your children are learning? So to summarize, just real briefly, do you have any tools that you want to share with our audience that have helped you not now or at any time in the past that you feel like might be helpful to other parents?
Should we go in order again? I have a lot of friends who homeschool, and so I glean a lot from them, just asking questions and trying to see the resources that they use and what's been effective. Unfortunately, a lot of that stuff is not, sometimes it's not relevant to Hawaii. So what I learned, I just about killed myself in the first year of homeschooling, just putting all the pressure on my shoulders, like I had to do it all and be great in every subject. And then I learned, like I said before, it's, you got to give yourself a lot of grace. I would say the greatest resource is trusting your instinct and understanding that the creative idea, you know your keiki better than anybody, even their kumu. And so to be creative with what you think would be their best learning style, and look around at the resources that you have, the kupuna who are maybe looking for things to do right now, and call them up and ask them if they'd be willing to share stories or share ike or teach a language lesson or whatever the case may be. I know that every mama has it in them to be creative and create the best learning opportunities for their kids. So I cannot say that there is a model that we use that fits our family, but I try to get advice from the friends who have been doing it, and then I try to assess our family, our ohana, and our resources that surround us, and make our own model that fits us. Nobody can do that for us.
Yes, I agree with Michelle. I think it's very specific to families. One of the things that I believe you can do is maybe ask yourself certain questions, like what types of skills and values do you want your babies to be equipped with, that they're going to be able to use for their entire life? And what types of generational knowledge do you have access to that you can share with your children? I think sometimes we might get too caught up in thinking, oh, it has to have this routine and it has to have this structure and this specific curriculum. And it can, but it doesn't have to, you know, and we got to give ourselves the opportunity to kind of let it be more natural. And how is it gonna create the best opportunities for us to teach and for our keiki to learn, and vice versa. Because I've learned a lot from my babies, and a lot of times the way we plan activities is based on their interests and what they're kind of talking about. And we can take that and spin it in lots of different ways and really make it into something very valuable. Other things I thought of is when you are looking at your ohana, really identifying what or who is your kaiaulu. And that's your community. What do you belong to? I think for our keiki, a lot of times it's really important, especially if we're in this lockdown situation, to understand that they are a part of something so much bigger than themselves. And if it's only about yourself, then there's so much waste there. And I think Piper did a good job of talking about that, the idea that her children know that, yeah, maybe it's kind of junk to be in the lockdown, but we're not the only people in the world. You know, everybody is making adjustments and sacrifices, and being aware of that and sensitive to it as well. So I think when we look at what our kaiaulu is, and now is a great time to kind of analyze those things. Everything from place, you know, like place names, you might decide, oh, like from my window, I can see Kiahia Kahoe and Iole Ka'a, like learning those place names with your keiki, looking into, hey, you know, we turn on the faucet and the water comes out, but where does our water come from? And doing that type of research. And you can go online now and find information like that somewhat easily, much more easily than before. Looking at resources that used to grow in your area and maybe finding ways to, okay, we're gonna plant those today because we knew they grew here. So maybe everything we tried to grow before always died, but perhaps it's because we were growing the wrong things, you know, and like taking those lessons and kind of changing them to make them very incorporative of your environment and your kaiaulu, but also specific to your ohana. I think that's been something that's been meaningful for our family. We also are very, the way I kind of teach my kids is we think that there's value in everything, and you know, learning should happen in all different environments, in a book, right now online, outside. So definitely trying to find ways to incorporate all of that. One of the resources I use for my babies, you might have heard of it, is Khan, because I think some parents are looking for actual online resources. So Khan is an online resource where they have curriculum. If you're looking for math and English, you want that stuff, it's really good there. And it's free and it's available and you can do it with your babies and it's great. If you're looking for Hawaiian resources, some of the places that we like to use in our home, the Nupepa Hawaii, which are the old Hawaiian newspapers, you don't have to go to the archives any longer to access them, which is not a good place to take babies anyway, because the papers are really delicate. But you can go to places like Ulukau and you can access those stories. And if you don't know Hawaiian, just looking at it and reading through it to your babies and letting their pepeo become ma'a to it is still a good thing, you know, and finding someone maybe to help you out with that. Oli and Mele Hawaii too. I think one of the fun things that we've been trying to do during the pandemic is chant more and sing more and learn more Mele and Oli. And some of them my keiki teach me, you know, like, oh, we learned this Oli before, Mom, I'll teach it to you. And my keiki have spent a lot of time at Mauna Kea. Last year was a really beautiful year where we had opportunities to participate in AHA throughout the year. And we started in this quarantine lockdown, we do AHA at our home now every day. And those are things that you can incorporate kind of to help, again, build that sense of place and kaiaulu. Pu'uhuluhulu has their website. So if you don't know songs and dances and chants, but you want to start learning, it's a great place to go. So I think we are very fortunate that there are a ton of resources available that we can go and look up online. But if you look into your friends, your family members, if you're living in multi-generational homes, there is probably so much knowledge there and skills. And maybe people are like, oh, no, I don't have anything to offer, but guarantee they do. You know, they've got some recipe that they make from scratch that your babies can learn about the foods that go into it and how to mix it and all those things. Or my husband, he's a woodworker. And so my children know how to use power tools, you know, but that's a part of it too. All these different experiences that we can use to equip our babies to be happy and to be successful in whatever they choose to do. Also always knowing where they come from and really picking up on those different kuleana that they're gonna take upon themselves.
Right on. This is amazing. Thank you for all this wonderful ideas and insights and confirmation. Reflecting on tools made me think about what at the beginning of our path, and what a tool that was really helpful for us was just reflecting on our own paths of Ea as parents. So for me, I was totally a nerd. I loved school. I went to school in different countries and different modalities as a result, and just was way into it. I went all the way through law school though, and didn't feel like I had actually connected to a sense of purpose. It wasn't until I really heeded my calling as a birth worker that I felt that sense of personal satisfaction that came through connecting with education in that way. And I chose an empirical model of training because for me, it was really important to embody my tools as a birth worker through an apprenticeship model. I didn't want to divorce the actual physical tools and the scientific tools from the sense of caring and the sense of it being a home-based modality. So that's an interesting dichotomy for me because I was someone who had success matriculating through a conventional educational paradigm, but then actually took in my own tools that I've used for my livelihood from a completely different model. My partner, on the other hand, did not love school, totally wasn't a fan, couldn't wait to be done with it, and had been apprenticing with his father, who was an electrician, sort of as a means of punishment as he was growing up in life. But through that path, actually first became acquainted with audio engineering. And once he figured that out, was super excited to go through his training program and finish his degree with that. So he had not enjoyed conventional education, but then found something that was super purposeful for him and has supported our whole family based on that. So for us, sort of looking back at our own trajectories and then trying to discern what we wanted to do for our children, it was really helpful to sort of download this concept that we hadn't really participated in the systems and the way they were designed to be experienced, but rather we had been able to draw from them what we most resonated with and use that for our own good. So for us, that was really something that underscored our confidence in the unschooling model, because we have faith that our children are on a mission of their own, and that all we have to do is really support them as they navigate their path. It's not necessarily for us to decide for them. So that really takes a lot of the pressure off. Another thing that was important was reflecting on our family values. For us, it's really important that we model kindness, and that we also teach our children to expect that as a form of respect when they receive it from other people. Integrity is super important. Sovereignty is absolutely essential to us. Leilani mentioned earlier about how her birth work and the paradigm with which she operates with her family informs her children a lot, and that's also important for us. We chose to birth sovereignly, so how we would choose to educate our children rather, would just sort of flow from that space. We couldn't really imagine protecting their sovereignty, their freedom on all fronts, and then handing them over to someone else with perhaps other interests that aren't necessarily transparently communicated. So that was another thing that just sort of encouraged our sense of confidence in the path that we've chosen. Other values that are really important to us are self-determination, that sort of flows from sovereignty. And that's interesting when you apply it as a homeschooling parent. Some of these things can actually be more challenging when you commit to them, but modeling your navigation through challenge is actually really part of the meat and potatoes of what we're trying to feed our children. Cooperative economics is another really important thing. These are values that are modeled within our household, but that we also try to reach into our community for. And so that's one that I think is actually also really pertinent in the current political climate as well, that we teach our children meaningful ways to leverage their participation in society. It's important that once we instill them with the values that we believe in our home, that they also understand how to wield those values when they go forth. So we sort of try to maintain conversation, and it really is not as challenging as it would seem. It doesn't have to be so compartmentalized. Children ask a lot of questions, and when you are clear on the values that you want to impart, the answers sort of wrap it all up in a bow for you when you just follow the inquisitions that they pose to you. So just reflection is a really important tool, I think, to help you clarify what you would like to do. The idea of clarifying family values, I think, also sets the stage for considering what your family legacy will be. Ultimately, the legacies that we leave behind are really communicated through the values that we instill in our children, I believe. My partner chose the last name Lovemore for our ohana about 6 years before we even conceived our first child. It's neither of our born names, but we really wanted to create something new together. And we wanted to really be clear on what it was that we were sending out into the world. And Lovemore was just the absolute distillation of the energy that we want to show up with and radiate. And so that was something that helped us when we were considering education for our children. This is our core value: loving more, bringing more love into every situation. And how are we going to teach them to be Lovemore ambassadors, essentially? And for us, going back to what I was saying earlier, a lot of that focuses on the soft skills. And so while it is important for us that they be academically strong, we really want them to also understand what it means to move in the world with integrity, to what it means to really be fundamentally kind. It's not necessarily about being soft or surrendering in every situation. Kindness with integrity combined really can put you in the position of actually being an advocate sometimes. And what does that look like? So really exploring and fleshing out our values and meeting them at their core has been essential for what we're doing with our kids, which leads us also to discernment. I know a lot of families who are tuning in may not be able to homeschool, let alone go all the way to unschooling right away. Sometimes we need to be able to work within the systems that we are using to support our lives. So discernment was another really important aspect for us. We didn't want to teach our children to be sort of dogmatic. We don't want them to parrot the values that we're teaching them. We want them to really internalize them. So sometimes that means being able to navigate your way through whichever situation you find yourself in. Discernment allows us to take materials that come from outside the world and discuss them. How do these things relate to the values that we cultivate in our home? How can we discern whether this is a space that we would like to be in or whether we want to remove ourselves? How can we discern how our energy, the energy that we're contributing is influencing this dynamic? So discernment is another really important tool that we try to impart to our children. And then the last one, which to me is one of the most fun, is just play. It doesn't always have to be so serious. Just play with your kids. Sometimes I think that parents, especially the ones who are just coming to home-based learning through this pandemic or through the quarantine phase, feel overwhelmed with the idea of having to adhere to curriculum structures, or overwhelmed with the charge of being the educator of their children. We want so much for our children, and then the idea of having to actually be the ones to feed it to them can feel overwhelming. So there's absolutely community to lean into, like Mehana was saying, but also play is just a great way to sort of discharge some of that tension. When all else fails, we can just get down on the level with our kids and sort of remove ourselves from that box that feels like something that we have actually created for ourselves. So, and play also really helps us to shift a lot of energy. We can funnel our frustration into it and release it. We do a lot of what we call game schooling. So I'm kind of intentional when I'm shopping about finding games or even creating games that allow us to sort of get a clue about some of the actual academic education that our kids know, which is helpful, again, reassuring the parents. So every now and then we'll have like a math-based game or a pattern game or a language game. And for me, I'm like, okay, great, you do know how to spell that. Oh, okay, good, you were able to do that math really quick in your head. But it doesn't put me in this position of sort of demanding that they display this knowledge for me, but rather that they're able to amuse themselves with showing up for the game. So I really appreciate that. Play also gives us a big opportunity to learn from our keiki. That's something that has been wonderful for us. We have been doing family game night for quite some time. So even before the lockdown, when my partner would be at work every evening, on his night off a week, we would always have a family game night. We would prepare by making desserts or treats. So the kids are cooking with me in the kitchen, math lesson beforehand. And then, we would just play, and our kids have become real fans of making up games, which has been awesome. One of our children in particular is really gifted at creating games. So that has also given us an opportunity to listen to what they're talking about, listen to their perspectives. And a lot of the games that they create really put us in the position of the keiki. A lot of the things are like physically crawling on the floor or climbing things and running and leaping. And those type of things really engage your physicality in a way that I think is really wonderful for me as a parent. As adults, sometimes we limit our physical engagement. And so freeing up and getting on the level with the kids there really can also inspire your creativity and your approach to learning. So that's been really wonderful for us. We ask them regularly to teach us something. And we also really try to center self-care with our play. So we want to make space for emotional authenticity. Sometimes people are disappointed when they don't win, and we don't want to rush through that. We try not to shame those emotions, but rather create a learning context so that we can celebrate the people who have triumphed and also allow them to be authentic with their emotional experience in that space. And we're able to model that via conversation. We give ourselves lots of practice by doing this regularly. It also gives them an opportunity to articulate their frustrations without seeking to manipulate the other players in the game. Just be honest about how you feel. We're not creating an expectation for anyone else to feel a certain way in response, but we can hold space for your feelings. Those, I think, are really important social tools that I want my children to be able to use in their lives going forward. And then the last thing that sort of comes into this play category, well, two last things. Play is also very often art in our family. I think artistic expression is a superpower, especially for these changing times. So sometimes we'll do a communal art project rather than a game. And that's also wonderful because it's a really great opportunity to decolonize our brain structure. Kids don't really think about rules when it comes to art. So it's a great challenge for parents also. And then the last thing, really this time, is to just take breaks. Art often gives you opportunities to take breaks. You might be working on something collectively and just take a step back to appreciate it. Sometimes when you're playing a family game, we have 7 keiki, so it's hard to create one game where everybody wants to participate all the time. It's okay for 1 or 2 kids to take breaks during that and then join in on the next game. That is modeling self-care. That is us trusting their bodily rhythm. That's us knowing if you say you want to sit this one out, that's all right. We're not going to shame you for that. We're not going to judge your participation. We've communicated our expectation that we come together as an ohana, and we expect you to do that periodically whilst also respecting your ability to show up and monitor your own self. So those are some of the tools. In a nutshell, reflection, discernment, and play, I think, are essential for home-based learning.
I'll just add brief, real short. First, know your rights as a parent and what your rights are as an educator for your children, because when you look at the laws, you actually have a lot of rights to what you can do as a teacher for your children. So I would highly suggest you research that and then go from there, because you are exactly what your kids need. And we don't need to think that we need like graduate degrees or PhDs or even a bachelor's degree to teach our kids. Like, as long as you have a fundamental education and desire, you have what you need to do this. So just wanted to say that. And also a great place to start for decolonizing is really just looking at your moʻokuaʻahau. It's a great, there's so many, it's math, fractions, history, writing. Like, it's just so much you can incorporate in one project that it's a really good place to kind of start. And from there, there's databases like Kipuka database and Ulukau, like Mehana was saying, that you can go and research your family and see like where your family lands at, and get on that, because that is the fight right now. And I mean, I don't know if that's the fight on Oahu, but that's definitely the fight here on Maui, is kuleana lands, researching your family lands and getting them back. So really, I that's kind of fundamental for us and our family, and really just being really, really involved with community issues, going to meetings. My kids have probably been to like 1,000 meetings, whether it's like the Department of Interior meetings all the way in 2014 to like OHA meetings and county council meetings. And we meet every Thursday with families in Lahaina to do genealogy research. So it's just lots of focus on community. So I think decolonization really begins there. As far as ourselves, Frantz Fanon is a great resource to learn about decolonization. I think it's hard for us to teach decolonization if we don't really understand it ourselves. So Haunani-Ke, there's just some really, really good decolonization resources for us as parents to help us do that with our children. And then like one thing I learned at, I went to Hālau Kū, which is a teaching certification program for Hawaiian immersion and Hawaiian charter school teachers. And one thing that they really taught us is like simplifying what you think of developing curriculum. Like, what is the papahana? What is the project, right? And then writing that down. Like, maybe it's going to the beach, like simply as that, going to the beach. Okay, well, what do you want to do at the beach? Well, maybe we're gonna beach comb and look at what we find. Simple as that. So write that there. Okay, and then what do you want to do with what you found? Like, okay, well, what did you find? Did you find plastic? Did you find trash? Did you find shells? Like, what kind of shells did you find? Like, let's look at what kind of species we have at our beach right down here. And then taking that and like, okay, what do you want them to learn from what they found? So it's really this like 4-point connection of like, what's the project? What are they doing in the project? What did they gather from the project? And what do you want them to learn from the project? And like really just breaking that down into, it could be anything. It could be going to a family reunion. It could be, going up to the taro patch. It could be anything. You could really break down any real life activity into that 4 simple, and that's how you prove to people like what you're teaching your kids. Like, we don't need to, we know ourselves, but that's a good way to prove that like, okay, this was the activity, this is what they did, this is what they gathered, and this is what they learned. So just a really great moʻokuaʻahau research. I have found it. Oh no, my phone's, oh no, it died.
Okay, I'm sure Leilani's gonna find a way to jump right back on. And I took some notes that I'll put in the chat on her process of coming up with projects. Lei, if you want to jump back in and finish what you were saying, you're welcome to.
Okay, yeah, sorry, hold on. My tablet's dying.
And while she's getting set up, I'll just let everybody know that we're going to try and wrap up by about 11:30. We just had one more thing we wanted to do before you folks all go. Okay, well, I'm gonna let Leilani fold in whatever she wanted to say next into our challenge. So we wanted to leave everybody with some ha'awina, some homework. I know that this platform really is very much a one-way communication where we're very fortunate that so many folks tuned in on the chat and the Q&A. We hope we answered most of your questions. But I had asked all of our panelists to just come up with like a 1 minute challenge or homework assignment for those of you listening out there. And of course, it's not graded and we'll have no idea whether you did it or not. But I want to invite each of our panelists to just leave you with a task should you choose to accept it.
So yeah, Trev, I'll just finish. I would say that my challenge would be exactly what I was just talking about, just the mo'okuauhau research, the family land research. And I have found that the best place to actually do that is talking with family and community first, and then going to the online resources, which are again the what's it called again? The database, Kipuka database with OHA and the Ulukau database. They both have genealogy resources there. Nupepa, the old Hawaiian language newspapers has resources. The Mormon Church has resources. There's Facebook groups that have Native Hawaiian genealogy. There's just lots of things. So to me, that's a great place to begin learning with your family, and a challenge for maybe putting that into your curriculum with your kids into the coming school year is family and land research, and maybe like malama aina, or it's like caretaking activities you can do at your local beach, your local river, your local forest, stuff like that. So, but mahalo nui, I'm sorry, I have to go to, I can't really stay on till 11:30, but I'm really, really mahalo everyone. And if anyone wants to reach out, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, you can message me, and I'm glad to help to stay connected with anyone who wants to continue this conversation. So mahalo nui.
Mahalo, Leilani.
Love you, Trev.
Mahalo, Leilani. That was awesome. So my challenge during this time, we're living in some really challenging times with challenging issues and circumstances. And the one thing that we're trying to do in our household is just to make space for conversations. We've made our dinner table a sacred space for our family to engage in the conversations and the issues. And so I have two challenges. My first challenge is that if you're not already doing it, that you spend time together cooking as a family. We've divided up into teams. And so 2 keiki have the responsibility to cook 2 nights a week, and then 1 night a week we go out or we get takeout. So I challenge you to spend more time around the dinner table or the table in general, and through the cooking of food and the sharing of food together, maybe bring up some of those conversations and make space for fears to be expressed or questions, just to open up the conversation and have it be a safe space. My second challenge, this is the one I'm going to give you some homework, is that there's a lot of things that we cannot control. One of the needs, we've all known it, but this pandemic has certainly magnified it, that suddenly I think most residents in the state of Hawaii are aware of our need for food security and the need for local produce to be grown. So we've had, our kalo sales have doubled in the last 3 months, just because I think people are so appreciative to be able to drive to a local source and a local farm where they can pick up food that they know who has grown it and how it has been grown with no chemicals and in a safe environment for their kids. So we also did a huli drive where we just offered free huli for people to come and pick up if they'd like to grow their own kalo. So my challenge to you is that's something that seems very empowering, and you can very easily weave every single subject into gardening. If you have a space where you don't need a big yard, you can even use a pot or something to sit on your shelf if you live in an apartment. But growing something seems to be very empowering for children, and to have something that they can take care of, even if it's you finished your green onions and you just set them in some water and grow the roots and then poke them in a pot. To be able to cut your green onions and chop them up and eat them for dinner, that's a place to begin. But my challenge to you is to grow something that your kids can mālama over the next month, 2-3 months, or maybe do it as a family and start something that can remain even when, however we come out of this time, that this would be a normal thing for your family to practice. I'm going to offer for you folks on Oahu, if anybody wants huli, you can message me or get my contact from Trevor. We'd be happy to supply you huli if you'd like to grow some kalo. It takes a year or 10 to 12 months with dryland kalo to be able to harvest, but you can also use the leaves to cook all sorts of things. Our education program, I encourage you to go on our website, hoʻokuaʻāina.org. Our education program is called Kupuʻohi. And if you go in there, you'll see the driving values of our multi-visit program. And under each of those values, there's a resource of lessons. There's videos, there's curriculum. You can download it, share. It's all available to the public. We just finished redoing all of that. So it's a wealth of resources. We have a kilo journal on there that I would say is directed towards maybe 4th to 6th graders, but could be used for the whole family. So if you'd like to come and pick up huli, we are happy to provide you either with the PDF of the kilo journal to watch your kalo grow and observe it, and observe the air, the rain, the water, all of those things. It's a great science project and something engaging as a family. We have physical booklets as well. If you want to drive to the farm, happy to give it. Trevor, if you'll share my resource, but that's my challenge. Grow something, stick something in a pot, seeds, green onions, whatever. And in a month, share a picture of your ohana or your keiki with the plant that's being grown. Mahalo nui, everyone, for allowing this time and space to share.
Mahalo nui, Michele.
Mahalo, Michele. I actually have 3 challenges, and the first one, you can do it with Michele's. So you can put our challenges together. And this one came from a place of aloha aina, aloha ohana. So taking care of the land and taking care of the family. The idea that, whenever you're working the land, like Michele was talking about, it's this reciprocal relationship. A lot of times people just think, malama aina, oh, pick up your opana, pick up your rubbish, leave it nicer than when you got there. That's good, but that's like kindergarten level 101. We need to get deeper. So mine goes at Michele, and it was finding something that you've always wanted to do that's land-based and actually doing it. And it could be anything from growing a plant, like Michele said, to finding time to actually go to the ocean more often and learn about the limu there, or help take care of that environment, whatever it might be. And this is something that I think is really good, especially if we are in quarantine, because it still gets you out, but in these socially distant types of requirements that we now have. I know for my ohana, one of the things we just started doing is, for a long time, we've wanted to do an ohana plot. with Kako'o Iwi, and we finally decided, you know what, we're gonna do it, and we're just gonna commit because we've always wanted to. We had encouragement from some hoa, and sometimes that's all you need. And now we've been doing it for about 2 months, and our kids love it, and they go there and they grow and they get dirty and they get to play and they get to actually alohaʻaina, and it's again a way of aloha ohana too. So challenge 1 is find something you guys want to do. It could be Michelle's and planting, you can couple ours together, but anything that has to do with the land or the ocean that is going to make this place, our home, a better place, establish kuleana, and make you and your family better off as a result also. You can learn from it. Challenge number 2 is in honor of Lā Hoʻihoʻi Ea, because Trevor said that this is, you know, what this panel is about and in honor of. And if you don't know a whole lot about what Lā Hoʻihoʻi Ea is and about the Kingdom of Hawaii and what happened to our islands and our kingdom, then my challenge is, as a family, do a little bit of research and start finding out some of that information. And I'm sure Trevor can post some really good sites. I can as well, that you can look at. I know we talked a lot about decolonizing education today, and so I want us to be a little bit mindful of that word. Yes, totally appropriate to say with education, the way Piper's been talking about it and Leilani, but when we talk about our kingdom, we should be using the word deoccupation. So if you've never heard of that before, this is my challenge to go and find out, what is deoccupation? What does it mean? How is it connected to things like Lā Hoʻihoʻi Ea, Lā Kūʻokuaʻāina, which is coming up in November, and all of the incredible accomplishments that our ali'i were able to do and the foundation they laid for our islands that are still in existence today. So challenge 2, go find out what deoccupation means. And then my 3rd challenge is one I hope you do really soon, right now, today. Trevor invited me to be on this panel to kind of represent the Kaiaulu community, the immersion school community. So I made a challenge with Olelo, and what I'd like you to do with your family is you can choose a room in your house, or you can just do your entire house if you want, and start with maybe 10 words or so, or you can assign, let's say you have 6 people in your family, everyone chooses 2 words, so you're going to get 12 words, and you're going to look up these words in Hawaiian. If you don't have a Hawaiian dictionary at home, you can still do my challenge. Get vehevehe.org or veheveheviki.org, and both of them are online dictionaries that you can use. And I'm sitting in front of my kitchen, so I did an example for you, and you're gonna go look up these words, and you can type them up if you have terrible handwriting like me, or have your kids write them, however you wanna do. And so I looked up some words that I was like, wait, what is this word? I speak Hawaiian, but I don't actually use this word very often. So I got poheopuka, which is the doorknob, and you're gonna type it up, and then you're gonna go and tape it right next to your doorknob. And this is an exercise I did with my kids when they were really young. We haven't done it in years, and I thought, even for myself, it's good to do again. And so I've got words, I focused on my kitchen. I got piula vai over here, which is your faucet in your kitchen, the sink area where the water comes out of. I've got keiki kukui, which is the actual light switch. So you're gonna choose these words, look them up in Olelo Hawaii. When you're looking up Hawaiian words, you type in the English, and then you make it a host of Hawaiian words. Then what you have to do is you got to look up all those Hawaiian words and figure out which one is the accurate one you're going for, and do your best. And I think it's a really good family activity. All you need is some paper, some Scotch tape, and then tape them around your house, so that your family constantly sees these words. When you see it, you say it. Maybe you speak English, but instead of saying doorknob, now you're going to say the Hawaiian word for it, until you all are ma'a with these words and really comfortable. And then you can add more. If you're real OCD and you don't like things up for a long time, learn them quick, and then you can take them down if you want. But I thought that this would be a really fun activity for you to do with all of your keiki, which will help us to grow our Olelo Hawaii. And you can start with just house objects like that. Okay, so 3 challenges: aloha aina, aloha ohana. What is the occupation of Hawaii? okay? And then your Onanoha Hawaii word challenge. So I hope you enjoy them. And again, do them as a family. They're not meant to be done individually. Do them as a family so you can all learn together and enjoy that time together. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Much appreciated.
Mahalo, Mehana. I love both of what you and Michele and Leilani had to say. And it's funny how many of our challenges work together so well. I have two also. Because decolonization has been such a theme for at least my conversation, but the general conversation today, I also wanted to do a challenge in relation to that. For us personally, part of the work of decolonizing has been to empower our children in their own identity. And currently, when we look at the zeitgeist of the world, considering really important movements around sovereignty, around Black Lives Matter, for us, it's been important to take the work of building their identity and also connect it to the work of solidarity for other movements. So my challenge for you is, I love the correction of language around deoccupation here, Mehana, and I would like for families to consider looking at decolonization on a global scale. Unfortunately, the harm of colonization has really been visited around the world, and we see the natural resilience of people and cultures resisting, and so decolonization has emerged in so many different forms. And I think that unfortunately this work is pretty grueling, and someone mentioned earlier the aspect of optimism. It can definitely be disheartening as well. So I encourage you to do some reading about global efforts towards decolonization and take heart. Be inspired by what other cultures and people have done throughout history in very minor ways, as well, the micro as well as the macro ways that we have resisted and enacted decolonization in our own lives and in our communities. Just for creativity, talk about these things with your kids. There are wonderful legends and stories sort of rolled into that assignment. So be intentional about sharing the inspiration with your children as well. And then my second task is I'm just going to share with you a practice that we have done in our family, and it's something that doesn't require any tools, but I like to have things that you can just take with you and pull them out whenever you need them. So in looking at solidarity, equality is sort of an offshoot of that, right? And accessibility becomes an issue. So in our family, we noticed it's always important for us to amplify the voices of the younger ones, because they obviously have less resources just in language and also ability to articulate themselves. So we really try to listen to them. And we've noticed that just moving through the day, there are too many times that we have to quiet our children's voices just because of the social structures we live in and life. We can't always answer that question in that moment, and we often tell them, we'll get to it later. And then life happens, and sometimes we don't revisit that. So we created just this option of talking about our day. We call it Let's Talk About Our Day at bedtime. It's a sort of post story time activity that we do. We co-sleep, and so for a long time, all the children were in one room together with us. Now our older children are in their own spaces, but they also come into our the family bed for this moment, and we just talk about our day. So for the younger children, it recounts the things that happened throughout our day. It allows us to answer any questions that they had. It also is a really wonderful opportunity for us as parents to reinforce the values that we're hoping that are being instilled throughout the day via various lessons that they just experienced. So we can talk about things that happened, reflect on how we responded, how we may have liked to respond differently, how we can move forward differently in the future. It's a really small exercise, and it can be just a few moments, or it can be fleshed out over longer periods of time, depending on how much time you have and how much of their day your keiki are seeking to integrate during that period. So we just call it Let's Talking About Our Day. And I get to curate, as mom, who's sort of guiding the conversation, what things we will talk about. Very often the keiki will say, wait, you forgot to mention this. And I'll get a chance to see what was in fact very important to them. And then we go around in a circle. So after I talk about the day and sort of remind them of the highlights, every member of our family gets to talk about the day from their perspective. And as a parent and educator, it's a wonderful opportunity for me to see what their actual takeaways are. What are you still thinking about from this morning as we reach bedtime? What questions did you have? What was not completely resolved for you, and how can we address that? It really helps to give me a sense of their little independent voice emerging, to hear what have been common experiences, shared experiences, distilled through their viewpoint at the end of the day. And then because that can sometimes go on for a long time with little keiki who like to recount all of the details, with the big ones, we've sort of morphed that into just talking about our favorite parts of the day. Also 7 kids, right? So we had to sort of break it down to a highlight reel after some time. So an alternative is talk about what's your favorite part of the day. And I still love that because, like I said, it gives you a chance to really see what's standing out for your kids. What's been the most important thing for them? What hurts do they need a hug for still? And you can get that hug right in before bedtime. Or, you know, what questions were driving them and how can we revisit that and find more opportunities to explore that tomorrow? So it's just sort of like a suggestion box feedback loop for the day's efforts of homeschooling. And I encourage you all to try that because I think you'll really love hearing your children's voices. And I think that it will also build confidence for you as an educator, whether you are partnering with another institution and just doing some home-based education after school, or whether you are taking on the full Monty yourself. It'll give you an opportunity to hear what your kids are receiving from it as well. And of course, the most important part, it gives you a chance to sneak in a few more I love yous before they drift off for the day. Thank you.
Well, mahalo, Piper, and mahalo to everybody. This has just been so enlightening for me as a parent, and from the feedback we're getting on the chat and also on Facebook, I think a lot of people found this valuable.